Welcome to Purposeful Planning for iPads in the Classroom. My name is Karen Griffin, and I have been in education for 10 years. I taught in the pre-K classroom as a teacher for 8 years, and I am currently an instructional technology coach with Newport News Public Schools. You can also find me on Twitter at ECCITC.
Hi everyone, my name is Tiffany Cobbs. I've been in education for 10 years as well. I've experienced teaching grades pre-K through 8th, and I'm also an instructional technology coach with Newport News Public Schools, and you can follow me on Twitter at ITCDSA. We're going to be focusing on 3 essential questions. The first question is, what is the EEE framework? The second question is, how can I use it to plan for technology use in my classroom? And the third question is, what are some grade level examples of learning goals that support the framework?
So the why behind this presentation kind of revolves around how we got to this point. This year, our pre-K classrooms in our district updated technology from desktops to iPads. And also, almost all of our schools in the district now have access to iPads in the classroom or on a shared STEM cart. And so as instructional technology coaches, we really wanted to find a way that teachers and students could utilize these new devices, but still maintain the focus on the learning and not just the tool.
So the book that kind of led us on this journey is Learning First, Technology Second by Liz Kolb. And basically it introduces the framework, the EEE framework, that helps teachers engage students in on-task learning and provides effective strategies for using technology. It summarizes case studies to guide appropriate tech integration and gives a lesson planning template to show teachers how to effectively frame technology choices and apply them in instruction.
So the first component of the EEE framework is engagement, and Liz Kolb in her book defined engagement as students becoming active, social, and focused learners of the content goals. When we look at measuring what engagement looks like from that definition, there are 3 questions we want to consider. The first question is, does the technology allow students to focus on the assignment or activity with less distraction? One example that I see a lot in the pre-K world is students are using Starfall. And while Starfall is a wonderful resource for learning activities, it can be distracting for students. Teachers need to incorporate some instructional strategies while using this app to keep students on task. The second question asks, does the technology motivate students to start the learning process? An example of this might be the Number Frames app by Math Learning Center. This helps keep students focused, and it gives them choices for manipulatives and how they want them to look on the screen itself. And it's got that voice and choice, giving them the ability to choose what they want it to look like. And the last question is, does the technology cause a shift in the behavior of the students where they move from passive to active social learners? An example of this might be the ChatterPix Kid app, where students become active learners as they are the creators and the sharers of the content in the app.
So our second component of the EEE framework is enhancement. Enhancement means using technology to add value to student learning. So to measure enhancement, our first question is, does the technology tool allow students to develop a more sophisticated understanding of the learning goals or content, those higher order thinking skills? An example of this is the Nearpod app. And Nearpod offers those higher learning skills such as asking questions, organizing and communicating ideas, expressing opinions, reflecting, investigating, collecting data, and creating shareable content. Our second question under enhancement is, does the technology create supports or scaffolds to make it easier to understand concepts or ideas? An example of this is the Flipgrid app. Now, with Flipgrid, currently our ESL teachers are using that app to help our ESL students speak correctly and learn the English language. So they may do a video of the students saying certain words and then playing that back so the students can see how their mouths are forming the words and how it looks to say those words. And then the third question under enhancement is, does the technology create paths for students to demonstrate their understanding of the learning goals in a way that they could not do with traditional tools? An example of that is Seesaw. The Seesaw app allows open-ended tasks, and it allows students to use tools to do those open-ended tasks, such as voice, video, and the drawing app. So they independently document and explain their learning as it's happening, and the teacher can provide that consistent feedback.
The third component of the framework is extension, and it's defined as something that needs to be authentic, involving real connections to everyday life. And essentially, the tool needs to be able to create a bridge between student learning and student lives, and also enhance those skills for everyday living.
So how do we measure extension? The first question we look at is, does the technology create opportunities for students to learn outside of their typical school day? An example of this is Google Classroom. So with Google Classroom, students can connect outside of the school learning day by accessing learning materials and assignments. So some learning materials could include anchor charts that a teacher has done in the classroom. The students then have access to that same anchor chart outside of the classroom. The second question under extension is, does the technology create a bridge between students' school learning and their everyday life experiences? So we have two example apps for this question. The first one is the Google Hangouts app, which allows students to take tours of a facility that they may not have access to, such as a science lab or a mechanic shop. The second app under this question is Zoom. And Zoom allows students to have the ability to connect to real life experts and experiences to build the connection between learning and real life. The third question under extension is, does the technology allow students to develop skills that they can use in their everyday lives? An example app for this question is CodeSpark. So CodeSpark provides project-based learning that develops skills such as innovation, technology skills, life and career skills, collaboration, and problem solving. So an example of students using this app include students creating a game. Once they create that game, they share that game with other students or other people that they would like for them to play those games, and it's shared on a secure platform.
So the Triple E measurement tool asks those questions for each of the components and offers the ability to score it so that you have a measurable way to evaluate the tool you're using and the learning goal that it applies to. So essentially those 9 questions that we just went over, you're going to score each of those answers anywhere from 0 to 1 or 2. So if yes, it does meet that component or that question, that's worth 2 points. If it somewhat meets the criteria of that question, then that might be a score of 1. And if it does not meet the criteria of that question, it would be a score of 0. So analyzing your results, if your score falls between 13 and 18 points, that's a green light. It meets all 3 components of the framework. If you score 7 to 12 points, you're kind of in that yellow zone where you meet at least 2 of the components, but teachers can also add instructional moves that better leverage the technology for student learning. And if you score 6 or below, that's like a red light. You generally only meet 1 component, and usually that's the engagement piece. You might want to look at the connection between technology, the instructional moves, and the learning goal. Most likely it's low. And you might want to reconsider if technology should be used for this lesson. We're going to pause for just a second here, and we're going to give you our scavenger hunt word. So the scavenger hunt word for this session is reflection. So we want to go over some grade level examples of what this could look like applied to lessons or goals. And we're going to start with pre-K. So in pre-K, we looked at a learning goal of students will identify letters and produce letter sounds. The technology tool we're going to be using is ChatterPix Kids. And you can also supplement that with iMovie with teacher support. What the students were doing here is they were going on an alphabet scavenger hunt where they had to take a photo in ChatterPix, use the recording feature to tell us what letter it is and what sound that it makes. We gave that a score of 11 as it meets 2 of the components of the framework, engagement and enhancement. And it also somewhat meets a few of the extension, but not all of them. In kindergarten, students had a learning goal of classifying things as living or non-living, and the technology tool they used was Seesaw. They went on a scavenger hunt around the school, and they were looking for pictures of objects in the environment, and they wanted them to choose 2 pictures and identify them as living or non-living, and they were going to be posting this to Seesaw. They were using the microphone to record their reasoning behind it. You know, is it living or non-living, and how do you know? We gave it a score of 17 as it meets all 3 components in some way.
Our 1st through 2nd grade level example is our learning goal. Students will describe how characters in a story respond to key events using cause and effect relationships. So our technology tool for this lesson is Newport. And the framework score is an 11. And it scored an 11 because Newport was kind of in that yellow zone because it lacked extension of the learning goals. So for this lesson, students listen to or they read a short story with a partner. Following the story, students will describe at least 2 cause and effect relationships from the story. And then an example from grades 3 through 5 is students will create a PSA on the water crisis in Africa and the importance of water conservation. So the technology tool we will use for this lesson is the internet browser, Google Docs, and Flipgrid. And this lesson actually scored an 18 on the framework because it met all 3 components of the framework. So in this lesson, students research a topic related to the water crisis in Africa. Next, they create a script using Google Docs, and this is all done in groups of 3 or 4. Then they will create a public service announcement using Flipgrid. So we wanted to wrap things up with some closing thoughts. So our first closing thought is the learning goals. So the learning goals is more important than the technology. Our second closing thought is the Triple E framework. So this is what will guide you as you are planning a lesson. And then our last closing thought is on instructional strategies. Instructional strategies can better leverage technology tools that do not meet all criteria of the framework.
We'd like to give some credit to Slide Mania for the presentation template you see today. All of the images of the app icons were found on the Apple App Store. And of course, we used the book Learning First, Technology Second by Liz Kolb to demonstrate her Triple E framework and apply it to instructional planning.